Okay, so I am going to record the meeting. That's another part of the thing I wanted to touch on with the Zoom housekeeping notes. So just so you're aware, this meeting is being recorded. That is just so that we can share it on our website and our social media after the fact for people who couldn't make it, or if you want to rewatch part of the meeting later, it'll be there for you. So that's the purpose of that. Along with cameras on, we just want to remind you that if you're not speaking, it's helpful if you have your microphone turned off on the mute setting so that we don't have too much background noise. And Tesla, who's our Trinity High School intern here at the RCD, is on the call, and she will be probably muting you if you by chance forget to be muted. And if there's some background noise coming from your channel, she'll just hit mute. So just a heads up on that. The next thing is in terms of the questions and answers. So as you hopefully know, we have quite a few awesome presenters lined up for the evening. And after each presentation, there'll be a couple minutes where anybody can ask questions to the presenter. And there's two ways you can do that. The first is you could use the raise hand function in Zoom, which is what you want to use if you want to unmute yourself and verbally ask your question. And if you're not familiar with the raise hand function in Zoom, I'll give a quick primer on how that works. So raising your hand in Zoom is a little bit harder than raising your hand in real life, but not too much harder. So you all should have a screen that looks something like this. Your Zoom screen will probably have more little squares on it because there's more people in the meeting, and it'll have my PowerPoint in the middle right now. But something like this, and you should have these controls usually along the bottom of the screen. And one of them will be this one I've circled here in blue that says participants. And if you hit that, it should open up this sidebar. And at the bottom of that sidebar, there should be a little button that is circled here in blue again that says raise hand, or maybe has a little hand symbol. And so if you hit that, a hand will come up next to your name in the participants list, and that's how I'll know that you have a question. And then in the participants list, you can also lower your hand once you've had a chance to ask your question. So that's what I'll be using. And so you can raise your hand at any time during a presentation. And that way, when we get to the Q&A, I'll know who has a question, and I'll call on you in the order that you raised your hand. So feel free to use that function if you want to ask verbally. Your second option is to ask questions in the chat. If you want to type out your question, you can do that again at any time during a presentation. And then when we get to the Q&A at the end of the presentation, I will read your question out loud to the presenter so that they can respond to your question. So those are your options for asking the question. The main thing is that we want to save those questions for the end of the presentation and not unmute and interrupt the presenter while they're speaking, just to avoid any confusion there. If you have comments throughout with things like, I can't hear the presenter, or that person's audio is bad, that's a great thing to throw into the chat so that Tesla can address that issue either with you if it's on your end or with the presenter. So, so those kind of comments are helpful, and they help us resolve problems. So that will be good. And if you have any questions about Zoom at all, you can feel free to message Tesla in the chat. And if you're not seeing a chat window, that again will be on your control bar, similar to where you found the participant button. So that's kind of the basics of Zoom. And then one of the fun parts of this meeting, as far as Zoom goes, is that we will be using the poll feature in Zoom to try to make it interactive and hopefully get feedback from you all throughout the meeting. So just to give you a little primer on the polls, I'm going to run a poll just to get you warmed up. And it's just going to be a couple of simple questions about where you're Zooming in from and what your interest in the community forest is. So I'll launch that poll. You should see, if you're a participant, you should see that poll pop up on your screen. And then you should be able to just select your answers really quickly and submit them. And then I'll share the results in a minute. So you should see it on your screen now. Feel free to answer these questions. I'll give people a minute to answer that. And then once we've got a good amount of answers, we'll move on. All right, the results are coming in. Okay, great. I'm going to close the poll and share those results. So we can see that most people on the call are in Weaverville. Welcome to those of you who are zooming in from elsewhere, potentially. And then the winner in terms of the primary interest in the community forest is fuel reduction and wildfire protection. But you can see we have a good mix of other interests as well on the call. So thank you for your answers there. And we'll be doing those kind of polls throughout to get people's feedback on different topics. So hopefully that's a fun way for you to participate. And just so you know, all the poll results are anonymized, so it's not like tracking who's saying what. We're just getting a temperature check of the audience as a whole. Great. So in just a minute, I'll dive into the agenda and who we're going to be hearing from tonight and what we'll get to talk about. But first, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that Weaverville is located on the ancestral and unceded land of the Nurelmuck-Wintu Nation. And I wanted to offer my respect and gratitude to all the members of that nation, past and present. And as we go forward with our conversations this evening about how to steward the land around Weaverville, I hope we can keep in mind a sense of the history of this land and the people who have stewarded it for thousands of years and continue to do so through the work of Nurelmuck-Wintu leaders like Sunny Hayward and Ray Patton and many others. So thank you for taking a moment with me to acknowledge that. And now to move on to the agenda for the evening. Kelly Sheen is going to jump on after me and give a little bit of a history of the community forest. We'll hear about the Weaverville Community Forest Steering Committee, the Fields and Recreation Project that's underway, the Weaver Creek Stream Enhancement Project, the Community Protection Prescribed Burn Project, the Power Line Clearance and Widening Project, an education project called the Trinity Children's Forest, updates on the Weaver Basin Trail System, and then sort of the cherry on top of the whole thing will be a discussion about our strategic plan update, where you'll have a chance to air some of your thoughts from throughout the meeting and place your input toward where you think the community forest should be headed over the next 8 years. So with that, I will hand over to Kelly to give a little bit of a history.
Kelly, I think you're muted.
You, of course I am. Okay, this is the one I want. So, just a real quick, simple overview, because we figured that there probably were going to be folks here that aren't necessarily familiar with the community forest and what the Weaverville Community Forest is, or any of its history. So, can everybody see the map I just brought up? Okay, great. I dug back into some of the archives to find some of these original maps. In about 2002, then the Weaverville Community Forest was not really in existence at that point, and the area that now is considered the original Weaverville 1000 is shown on this map. It's about 1,000, just shy of 1,000 acres on BLM property, and this land was slated for a land trade with SPI. And there were members of the community that were concerned about viewshed issues and some other particular issues that were prevalent at the time. And so the community approached the BLM at that point and said, is there anything else we can do? And at that time, there was a brand new authority, which was called stewardship contracting, that basically allowed the BLM to enter into an agreement with the Trinity County RCD. We are the stewards of the community forest. They entered into an agreement with the RCD at that time for for this original 1,000 acres, with the thought that the community would be able to basically have some input into the management of that property. Whether it be forest health or trails related or just general management of that property, of that land within the Weaver Basin. So that agreement was entered into in 2005, and shortly thereafter, in 2008, we began to approach the Forest Service with interest in basically expanding upon that in a larger part of the Weaver Basin itself. And so we, at that point in 2008, added almost 12,000 more acres, as you can see in green, a fairly large portion of the northern part of the basin. The early management of the community forest revolved around some thinning projects that were considered, fuel breaks essentially for the western part of the community. And not only did we have the benefit of being able to put in a shaded fuel break along the Democrat Gulch Road and do some actual green timber harvests within that acreage in the BLM, we also were able to yield some community benefits, like very low cost firewood that was sort of subsidized by the sales of the timber that came off of that property. So these stewardship agreements are approximately 10 years in length. So we had one with BLM at 2005, and then one in 2008 with the Forest Service. When in 2015, when the BLM, the initial stewardship agreement came due, we re-upped that, and they added an additional 2,300 acres of BLM property at that time. And basically at that point, it encompassed most of the public lands within the Weaver Basin itself, and as you can see, largely surrounding the community of Weaverville, which has allowed us to do many, many projects. On the Forest Service side, we've had Brown's 3 projects called Brown's Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3, which were similar thinning projects, some of which created what we call retained receipts, which were used to do other sort of restoration work. So the funding from the retained receipts, both on the BLM side and the Forest Service side, were funneled straight back into projects that benefited the Weaverville Community Forest. The guiding sort of body of the community forest itself is the Weaverville Community Forest Steering Committee, and it's a very loose sort of affiliation of both agency folks that represent the landowners, the land managers, as well as community members that are interested in this particular the management of this community forest. And with that, I will hand off to one of the longest members of the Community Forest Steering Committee, Colleen O'Sullivan, who is also a director here at the RCD. So, Colleen.
Hi, everybody. Kelly and I have to share a room because my laptop died in the other room. May it rest in peace. But anyway, I'll wear a mask when I'm not talking. So the steering committee kind of evolved out of the community organizing that myself and other folks did in town in the late 90s and early aughts to kind of respond to this imminent trade that the BLM at the time wanted to do. with a big timber company. So out of that, organizing and attending meetings and just getting the whole thing off the ground, we called ourselves the steering committee, and we would meet with our partners to discuss how we were going to make this into a community forest that worked for everybody in the community. And it was really important to us that this be a citizen-led effort and committee, so that recommendations, suggestions, complaints, policies, implementation measures even would come from the ground up as much as possible, given that our federal partners have their own programs of work. So it stayed and has stayed very loose. It's called a committee, and that's about as formal as it gets. It's very decentralized. There's really no structure. There's no chair. I mean, the RCD will moderate the meetings, but there isn't any formal structure. Anyone can go to a meeting at any time, stop going and come back. We've had people come and go quite a bit since the beginning, which has been over 20 years now. And we, in the past, have had kind of irregular meetings. We've met when we needed to update the strategic plan, or when there were some real concrete projects that were coming up, things like that. There was never any kind of timetable or set dates for these meetings. But now that we have more staff on the RCD to actually represent the community forest to our federal partners and our other partners, I think there'll be a more formal structure as far as meetings go. And I think the wonderful thing about going forward with Zoom is that folks can come on if they want and attend these meetings virtually, find out what we talk about when we get together with our partners. The Trinity Trail Alliance being kind of one of our newest partners, which is exciting, and see if they want to participate. These public meetings are for folks to come forward and let us know what's going on, what they'd like to see, what could be different. The steering committee meetings deal with sort of our focus and drive, where we're going to drive this thing, what we're going to emphasize. And so folks that are in the public now and want to participate a little bit more, that's a way to do it. A few years ago, there was, and there still is, but there was a really bad camping homeless problem on West Weaver Creek. And we got a lot of complaints, and BLM had a lot of complaints. And so our supervisor, Judy Morris, came up with the solution that we now have on the books, which is the board passed a special ordinance that just encompasses the BLM lands, that says that mandates there's no overnight camping in that part of the BLM land. And the enforcement comes from BLM, but at least there's a tool now, and there wasn't a tool before. And then just a couple of months ago, a neighbor of mine had a problem. She lives down along the creek off of Oregon Street, and there was a person who had constructed some sketchy shack across the creek from her and was living there and, you know, making a mess and starting fires. And so she contacted me. She said she had contacted the sheriff. So they said, oh, we can't do anything about it. It's, you know, federal land. They obviously don't know about the ordinance. So I said, no, get a hold of BLM and they can do something about it. Sure enough, the next day they tore it down and got rid of it. So those kinds of things come out of steering committee meetings, they come out of public meetings. You know, there's real action that comes out of it. And so it's really important to find out what folks are thinking and wanting and not wanting, so that we can kind of steer this committee towards those kinds of activities, those kinds of, you know, solutions, you know, discuss with our partners, whatever. And now with Zoom, people can really participate in a very easy way. And I would encourage you to do that and get on the mailing list and we can let you know when there's meetings, and you can come on in and join us and continue to make this community forest, a really special thing. So that's my pitch on the steering committee. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Colleen. Appreciate it. So I'm going to launch a poll related to Colleen's topic about participating in the management of the community forest. So take a minute to respond to that. And then we also, during this time, you can raise your hand or put a question in the chat if you have questions for Colleen. So I'll launch the poll and keep my eyes peeled for any questions in the chat or any raised hands.
Oh, yeah, Joe Cox. Probably Judy isn't on this issue.
One thing I will mention too, just to follow up, we are currently, as I mentioned, the 2015 extension on the BLM end of things will be expiring in 2025, and we had also re-upped with the Forest Service in 2018 at the 10-year marks of both of the initial agreements. And so, as it stands right now, the community forest will continue, into the next 5 and 8 years, and the strategic plan that we intend to discuss later in this meeting will basically cover those, those years. And, we certainly hope that this community forest will continue to live on as, we continue to renew those agreements.
Okay, thank you. I closed the polling and I can share the results. It looks like people are all on the positive side of the spectrum, either agreeing or not agreeing or disagreeing. So thank you for your results there. And I am not seeing any questions, either any raised hands or any questions in the chat. So unless I am mistaken, I think we can move on to the next speaker.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Azalie. Our next speaker is Lara Graham with the United States Forest Service, working with the Shasta Trinity National Forest. Welcome, Lara.
Good evening. I work in Weaverville at the Weaverville Ranger Station, and my job title is Fire Management Specialist, Prescribed Fire and Fuels. It's kind of a long title, so we shortened it to Fuel Specialist. So like I said, I work here in Weaverville. If anyone has questions or would like to reach me, I believe Azalie is going to put my email address somewhere where you can access that. So I am going to talk about the Weaverville Community Forest Fuels and Recreation Project. And I want to share my screen with you real quick. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this. This platform I'm using is an ArcGIS story map or storyboard. It's supported by Azalie. And so I wanted to use this to describe the project, and eventually, this is a draft, but eventually when we publish it, it will go online so the public can access it. And it describes the project, but it also, as we implement the project, we can upload pictures and videos of the work that's being done so people can keep up on what we're doing. So let's go to the first slide. We just do a brief introduction about what is a Weaverville Community Forest. And, Kelly and Colleen talked a lot about that already. And the intent of this little section is not to really, give a whole lot of history, but just to give a little bit, a summary of it. And then also we have the website that people can go to find out more. I know the RCD has done a great job explaining the background, the history of the WCF on their website. Okay, so what is the purpose of fuels reduction within the Weaverville Community Forest? Well, as most of you know, it all started back in 2001 with the Oregon fire, the first Oregon fire. And since then, we've had 3 other fires burn into the WCF and into the Weaver Basin. So, and because of this, you know, we started doing fuels reduction treatments because in 2001, after that first burn, that first fire, we had so much dead fuels on the landscape. And so there was a need to reduce, take some of that out, you know, the snags, the dead trees. So we started projects then, and we have had about 19 years of work that we've been doing in there. And so there's a need now to go back in there and to maintenance these areas so that they can be effective still. Because as you know, vegetation grows and fuel loadings accumulate. And so we have to go back into these areas. And so you can see in 2014, if you look at this map over where my cursor is, you can see in the light purple, that was the Oregon 2014 fire. And in this light cream colored area is the 5-cent wildlife enhancement burn that we did about 8 months prior to the fire. And so as you can see, what happened is it started west of Weaverville along 299. It burned eastward. It was wind driven and fuels driven. It burned eastward. And when it hit that 5-cent unit, you can see it's almost like a catcher's mitt. It just started to flank around it. It did end up spotting over it, and you can see the purple area on the other side of it. But because of that burn, we were able to get dozers and hand crews in there. It just, what it did was it slowed it down, and it gave firefighters a chance to stop it. If you hover over these points, it describes some of the fuels, and these are actual pictures within the WCF. And like this one is at Musser Hill. And you can click on, there's a little narrative about an oak woodland fire regime. Or you could click on this one, and this one's about ladder fuels. The forest has a dense understory growth of conifers known as ladder fuels. And so we're seeing a lot of small diameter trees come up in the absence of fire. And so that's, you know, one of the reasons we need to come back in there and do some maintenance. Okay, what are the fuels reduction methods that will be used within the WCF Fuels and Recreation Project? So I have a map. As you can see, these multicolored blocks, these are treatment units. And if you were to click on the treatment, it'll give you a little information about what it is. So this one that I clicked on is over at Glennison Gap. It's about 210 acres. And the proposed treatment we would like to do is manual thin, prune, pile burn, and underburn. And so eventually people can come in here and click on these areas and see what we're planning to do. And then we describe a little bit, real general descriptions about manual thin, mastication, prune, pile burn, and underburn over on the left side of your screen. You can read those definitions. And just to reiterate, this area, the majority of it has been treated in the past 19 years. So we're just going back in there and we're doing maintenance. Okay, then we'd want to talk a little bit about the difference between prescribed fire and wildfire. And I think most of us here know the differences. We live in this fire dependent ecosystem. We work here, and we're pretty knowledgeable about the differences. This prescribed fire we did, this video that you're seeing, we did that about 5 years ago. It's in the Weaverville Community Forest. It's one of the Brown's harvest units. I think it's the first one that got harvested. Okay, who benefits from fuels reduction and treatments? Definitely we have community protection, and we all know that effective fuels management can you know, save lives and protect infrastructure. It can help firefighters to suppress a wildfire while it's still small. And it also increases safety for the public and firefighters. Fuels management can also improve recreational opportunities, such as reducing excess fuel loadings along trails and vegetation and fuels along trails, and increase visibility. This project also, because it's WCF fuels and recreation, it also is proposing to add almost 6 miles of user-created trails to the system, as well as about 10 miles of new trail to the system. And once I complete this presentation, Mike McFadin, the trails manager, he is going to talk more about those trails. Then we go on to talk a little bit about forest ecosystem, more general, just education for people who might not know about fuels reduction and some of the benefits. We also, we talk about some benefits to wildlife. The video you're seeing is one of the prescribed burns. And I can't remember which one it is, but it just kind of shows you the smoke and the progression as the fire burns across the landscape. The picture of the fire on the left is a high severity fire. This was a high severity area from the Oregon 2014 fire. And as you can see, the destruction of that watershed, and how we want to do fuels treatments so that we don't have wildfires that come through here and do that kind of damage. Some of the impacts of the project, we will have some trail impacts, such as noise from chainsaws, smoke from prescribed fire. So, you know, some of our recreationalists will have to tolerate that, but ultimately, I think it'll be a benefit. And I know that we've been doing projects out there, and we've had great support. We don't close the trails, like officially close the trails, but we do put signs up to warn people, and we still have people that come out and actually ride right next to it because they want to see it or whatever, and they seem to be really supportive. So that's really nice. So we will have smoke impacts from this project. Most of the area you see on the map to the right, there is prescribed burning on every piece of this, and it's about 4,800 acres. So, and it's in the Weaver Basin. So we will be working with North Coast Air Quality Management District. And just keep in mind that our prescribed fire burn plans and our smoke management plans, they're written that, you know, we write them to minimize smoke impacts. So unfortunately, we can't reduce all smoke. We can't just get rid of it. And there are people who it is a nuisance or an inconvenience for people, especially those who are sensitive, who have asthma or other health-related issues. But we do, we firmly believe that tolerating a little bit of smoke now can buy us a lot. So during a fire season, where a wildfire can produce, you know, a lot more smoke than a small prescribed fire that is controlled. And we do, when we do ignite prescribed fire, there's a lot of planning that goes into it, and a lot of coordinating with other agencies to make sure that we have the people and the right conditions. And so we wait for the appropriate weather and fuel moisture conditions that will lead us to success. And then my final slide is to list the partners that we've worked with when doing fields reduction projects within the WCF. And that concludes my story map. And so do I have questions from anybody?
There is at least one question I have, but I think I'll hold it to the end. I think I know Mike was going to talk about the other part of this project. So maybe we'll just do all of your questions all at once, if that's okay.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay,
Okay.
so thanks.
Yes. So I need to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Mike McFadin, who works for the United States Forest Service.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the trails portion of this NEPA project. I think I've got my screen up now. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. This portion of the NEPA, I guess, just to give it a quick nutshell view, we've got a whole bunch of different trails in the Weaver Basin that are being adopted. A lot of them are ditch lines that have been there forever and have been used for a long, long time, but they're not part of our official trail system, so it makes it difficult for us to maintain those. So we're going to be looking at adopting some of those, but we're also looking at some new construction, a dozen or so miles. And so I'm going to quickly overview those. This first tile here, this is the Browder project. It starts off on private land down at the head of the Garden Gulch Loop. This is all flagged in, ready to go. We're just hoping the NEPA gets done and we can start work as soon as we get some soil moisture. It ties in to the nose of Jackass Ridge. And any of you familiar with this trail, it's where the single track terminates on a sharp corner and then it's a road. So that's that project. Then right below it is the Blue Lead mine construction. Once again, the majority of this project is on private property. And then the forest portion is this purple area here. This trail is going to be a little non-traditional. The Browder that we just looked at is going to be a very low grade single track, whereas this one's going to be steeper and have some banked corners and things. The bicycle people will like it a lot. Other people are more than welcome to use it, but it's going to have a very pedalhead flavor. And then we're going to do some small additions / reroutes up by the East Weaver campground. This little hook here is going to eliminate that last little climb coming up out of there where it's really erosive and we can't really do anything about it. So that's going to be a nice little single track addition. This is the Four Corners, and this is the cutoff that goes up to the upper trail, which is an old cat road. We're going to eliminate that and replace it with a nice single track. And then we're putting in a little cutoff here between Jackass and the East Weaver campground trail. There's the biggest portion of construction starts off up by Low Gap, and it's going to be about 6 miles of new single track construction that will allow you a bailout point on the old fire line or a bailout point down by the road. This one is going to be, I think, a lot of fun for everybody. Trail runners are going to love it. Uphill, downhill, bicycle people are going to love it. I imagine it'll become part of the horse race pretty soon as well. So that's the projects we have going in association with this NEPA. Any questions?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I am currently putting Lara and Mike's contact information in the chat if you do have follow-up questions that maybe we don't get to or you don't think will fit in this format. So I have a quick poll about this project that I will launch to get some general feedback about it. And then I have at least one question, so make sure to raise your hand or put a question in the chat if you have more questions. But meanwhile, we will launch this poll. Let us know what you think. Okay, all right. We got a good response and a great response to see, really positive response. So happy to see that. Thanks everybody for participating. Most people really strongly agree that this will benefit the WCF, so that's great. So the question that I received in the chat, I'll read now it's focused more towards Lara's part of the presentation, and it's from Jill Cox. She said, Lara mentioned that they are doing a maintenance project of an area that had been treated 19 years prior. At what point in time would a project be considered new rather than maintenance? That's the question.
That's a good question. I think that, so the projects we've been doing over the last 19 years, we've been doing it at different, we have it on a schedule. And so typically about 10 years, a project needs maintenance, and it kind of depends on the vegetation type and the growing site. But say, for example, in the Musser Hill area where we have a lot of brush fields, typically the brush fields can go 5 to 10 years before they should receive fire again. And oak woodlands are also they have a really short return interval of 3 to 7 years. So in our past project, our past environmental documents, we never wrote maintenance into those documents. We would do a project, and then if we wanted to go back in there and maintain them, we would have to do another environmental document to go back in there. And so that's kind of what we're doing with this, is we didn't write maintenance into those older NEPA documents. So here we are sort of doing this maintenance project, and we're actually in this document, we're writing in that these areas will be maintained on more of a schedule, so that we don't have to keep going back and doing the whole NEPA process, which can be costly. We don't have to keep going back and doing that. I hope that answered your question.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Oh, hi. So Laura, one of the things that we saw on a field trip through the forest post the 2014 fire was that it burnt through Garden Gulch with a high intensity, blew through the stream zone, and that had not been treated, prior to the fire. So my question is, are we going to be able to go in and treat some of these stream zones for fuel reduction?
Yes, we're already seeing we're gaining ground with some of our regulatory agencies regarding treating riparian areas. We are allowed to, at least with this project, it's different for every project, but for the WCF Fuels and Recreation project, we are allowing prescribed fire to back down into riparian areas. And we are in more like, intermittent or ephemeral riparian areas. We're allowed to do a little bit more than, say, in a perennial fish bearing. So it all kind of depends on, and I know you're familiar with this, John, some of these like Barney Gulch and Little Brown Creek are, they have threatened and endangered species, right? So like the critical coho salmon, I think is that right, Amelia? I'm kind of not a fish expert here, but so we have to be provide more protection for those. But some of these upland riparians where they don't flow water much, and they have their conifer vegetation, we can actually go in there and do more of thinning small diameter trees, as long as we're providing that shade that is needed. We're doing more and more like that.
Thank you.
Thanks. There was another question in the chat about that says, where can we obtain maps of proposed trails in the community forest? So I guess that's targeted more toward Mike.
There we go. Yeah, it went out in the original scoping document, but you're more than welcome to stop by the office at any time and I can show you the maps or even print one off for you.
Great, thank you. And then, great. And then I think Alex had a question as well. You can go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, hey, Mike, I just wanted to ask on the timeline for the NEPA, how's it looking to get that completed? I believe it was maybe November 1st. We were supposed to have a signed decision memo. Are we still on that track or is it slowing down?
It's slowing down. I think it'll be more like December, January, which is kind of terrifying because then we're into the holiday season and who knows what will happen next then. But I know the interim ranger, she's real hot to get this done. She's not letting up the heat. She really wants to see this project signed.
So is there anything that the Weaverville Community Forest can do to push that along? Because we kind of, with us helping to pay for some of the third-party NEPA, we have a little bit more skin in the game. So just trying to figure out how to get that done so we can start building the trail on the private ground. I don't think we have the confidence to build that until that NEPA is at least signed. So if there's anything that we could do, maybe just let us know if we can poke the ranger a bit.
Yeah, anytime we get public comment, we take it to heart. So certainly contacting the ranger and continuing to express the urgency, because you know how history has been. Sometimes these things drag out for years, and that's just unacceptable. And I've heard the ranger say that several times, that missing these deadlines is unacceptable. She wants to see this thing done.
Okay, great. I'm seeing no more questions, so thank you all for your questions. Appreciate it. I think we can move on.
All right, thank you, Lara. Thank you, Mike. We're going to move on to the next presenter, who is Amelia Fleitz. She is the Watershed Coordinator Program Manager for the Trinity County Resource Conservation District. And welcome, Amelia.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amelia Fleitz. And yes, I'm the Watershed Program Manager for the Trinity County Resource Conservation District. Azalie, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a pretty general view of one of the projects that we have within the Weaverville Community Forest, and that's our Weaver Basin Stream Flow Enhancement Project. And it is composed of four different projects. So we have a forest health planning project in section 20, and I'm going to show you in detail and break out what's going on in each of these different smaller projects. Then we have an invasive weed inventory and treatment with developing the plan for removal along Little Browns Creek and West Weaver Creek, and then a channel rehabilitation around Little Browns Creek. And then there's a stream flow enhancement project along the West Weaver Creek area, and that's in the Moonley Ditch and Weaverville Community Service District area. And this project is funded by the Wildlife Conservation Board of California. And so we're very grateful to have that funding and to be able to have this planning opportunity. So thank you to them. So here we have a map of the Weaverville Community Forest. This is the current map, and then this is the map of our project area. And so the outline is of the Weaver Basin. And so that's the Weaverville Creek Basin area where all the water in that area is flowing down into the centralized point of Weaver Creek. So everywhere inside this green area is within the project area for us to work. And so I just wanted you guys to see how the basin is related to the Weaverville Community Forest area. And for each project, I show specifically where it is in the Weaverville Community Forest. So for the first part of the project, this was this larger project was developed by Tracy McFadin and Donna Rupp, and it's since been passed on to me. And then I'm really working collaboratively with a lot of our partners and also internally. So you'll see that there are many different members of the Trinity County RCD that are working on different aspects of these projects. So first with the Forest Health Project, if you've heard about this project previously, it was an oak woodland restoration that was developed in Weaver on the Forest Service side, originally intended for Oregon Mountain, which was then moved into this little Browns Creek section 20 that's on a BLM parcel right here in the Weaverville Community Forest. And so with that, you see that there's a lot of overstocking in some of these areas. And so we've looked at doing an oak woodland release in that area to enhance the stream flow for Little Browns Creek. And we've also looked at, it's gone through many renditions of this project. So originally oak woodland release, which moved into potential harvest to fund further restoration afterwards, with Charlie Holthouse as a participant on helping me develop that part of the project. And now we're moving into a fuels reduction treatment plan with the BLM to prioritize these sections of section 20. So these would be potential units for treatment in that section, as well as looking to expand to neighboring BLM units. So at this point in time, we've had some Weaverville Community Forest steering committee meetings out there on the ground to talk about potential treatments and how to complete that. And right now the Trinity County RCD is working on developing those treatments and the environmental compliance with the BLM. So that will likely be an EA, and so look forward to hearing more about that as it continues in development. Into section 2, which is the invasive weed inventory and removal plan. So we had Ian Erickson and then on to Katie Howard working with us on this project. And so we focused on looking at the Little Browns Creek area and then also into the West Weaver Creek area. So these were the two sections right along the creek sides that were surveyed here. And so I can show you what we found. And so they were looking for these different species here. So we have some of our most popular noxious and invasive weeds that were coming through the area and looking for to remove them along the streams beds so that the seeds aren't traveling through the water and further disperse downstream. And also just to improve the riparian health along these corridors within the community forest. And so here is the results of some of the surveys that were completed in 2018. So Katie Howard was out completing these along West Weaver Creek, and she is now our vegetation project coordinator. And so we can see that we have identified these species along this route. And we have the proposal for the treatment plan, and we're currently working to finalize that and get it over to the BLM for approval. And so here again, we have some private land where we have some noxious weeds, invasive weeds identified, and then up along Little Browns Creek again. We do expect that there could be some additional spots as these were surveyed in 2018, and we could see some more spreads as it's now 2020. But these give us a great reference point to start treating these areas and look at the potential to treat any larger populations that we find moving forward. All of the treatment proposals are for manual removal at this point in time, and I don't anticipate seeing much change from manual removal. The one variation between when all of these will be treated is seasonality as to when they're available to be pulled for identification purposes so that we don't pull any native lookalikes, and also to make sure that we're capturing them before they fruit and seed for the year so that we're not leaving any extra remnants to seed for the following year. So that is currently in development with our vegetation program. Into the channel rehabilitation of Little Browns Creek. So this project is being developed by the Northwest California Resource Council and over by the 5 Cs. And so they're working on a section of Little Browns Creek that's higher up in the drainage. So this is Highway 3 right here. And so they're working to add some sinuosity and some more features into this fairly straight section. And you're going to see in a few minutes. We have this beautiful creek in here that has been fairly channelized from old mining remnants. And it has some other concerns as well. So it's right up in this section, right along Highway 3 in Little Browns Creek. And so here we have the stream, which you can see is fairly straight. And then we also have a section below it, which they're considering part of their reference reach that they've already restored. So they're working on building upon existing projects to continue to lengthen areas of restoration throughout the Little Browns Creek area. Here is one of the proposed channels for the morphology. So you can see we're looking to connect into the floodplain, add some large wood features, and also they're considering making sure that all of the side channels are going to connect and work with the new features that they're installing. So this is 2 of their reaches, 2 of 3 reaches, which they've split up in this section here that they're looking to impact. And so above that, it's a little less sinuous, but still providing some sinuosity in there. Something you may remember is from the February storms between 2018 and 2019. And so this is the Little Browns Creek. During that time, this here is a telephone line. And so the telephone poles are actually right in the riparian corridor. So they're looking to not only work with around those utility poles as they may be removed at this point, as the storm pushed most of them down. So TPUD is looking and other utilities are looking to actually bury the lines just outside the riparian corridor. So they'll be likely to have a much better enhancement with those removed than prior to that storm. So that's pretty exciting for them. And this is a project again by 5 Cs and Mike Lancaster is leading that. And then on to the West Weaver Creek stream flow enhancement. So with this, we're looking at the Moonlee Ditch and also the Weaverville Community Service District stream flow diversion, which is providing water to the community of Weaverville. So we'll continue to talk about that one. So there's the 2 parts. So first with the Weaverville CSD and their diversion. So we have West Weaver Creek. And so up at the top is the diversion. And I'm going to show you a quick picture of that in a few minutes or just a minute. And then there's a couple different styles of piping that connect all the way down to the redwood box. So at the redwood box is where the water actually flows from this area, from the ditch line over under the road to the CSD treatment plant, which is over off of Trinco. And so at this point, this is where the water flows off to the treatment plant. All through here is a myriad of a compilation of different styles of piping. So we're seeing some have metal, some are plastic, PVC, different kinds of PVC, even old mining pipe as well, mining flume. And so one big component of the proposal is to clean this up so it's all one style of piping and something that's going to last long. So we see a lot of the plastic has been deteriorated from fires that have passed through the areas, from logs that have fallen and cracked it or busted holes. And so looking to clean this up and have one standardized pipe system. Some of this is also open ditch line. And so just to reduce the overall have going out into the surrounding areas and conserve as much as that as we can so that we don't have to take as much from the river to still get our same CFS. So that's one of the projects we're looking at on this side. And this is the diversion box right here. And so here we have our plastic piping that starts the piping over to the redwood box. And so up here we have the beautiful West Weaver Creek. It flows up into this redwood box here, and it continues down all the way until it gets into the piping. On the other side of that, after it passes the redwood box, CSD takes their allotment, and then there's overflow. And so that overflow goes into the Moonlee ditch. The ditch is currently flowing, but it does not reach its end recipients. And so end users such as the Weaverville Cemetery and the Young Family Ranch currently don't have an active flow to support any of their watering needs, and neither do any of the other members of the Moonlee Ditch Association. And so we would like to look at working with the Weaverville Community Service District to take the water that they would have allotted to them, the overflow, and move that through the Weaverville CSD treatment plant on Trinco, and then to have it piped along their ditch line. So we're conserving water and also providing water to the users of the Moonlee Ditch Association, which currently don't have the flow that they have the rights to. Here we can see, it might be a little hard, but in these areas, the water, this is the ditch line in here, the water is actually spilling out over the side of the ditch line and going down the hillside. And there's multiple points where this happens along the ditch line. And so it reaches to the point where there's no water getting to our end users. So at this point in time, does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Amelia. There's a question in the chat from John that says, any estimate on how much water is lost from the leaking pipe and ditch? What percent?
Leaking pipe. So
You want me to answer that, Amelia?
well, we have there's different parts of it. So there's the open evaporation of the ditch line and before it gets taken to the CSD. And then you do actually have leaking pipes in a second section. But yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
So the water that's actually currently going down the ditch from the diversion over the redwood box, where the 8-inch main is that goes down to the goes down to the CSD treatment plant, has, according to Wes Scribner, when he was the district manager for the CSD, he was estimating that the overflow, because they have to keep a head on that they don't want to pull air into their line. So there's the water that flows past that box. He estimated out to be something like 500,000 gallons per year.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. I've just put Amelia's contact info in the chat if you did have a question you wanted to follow up with her on. And very quickly, I'm going to launch a poll about Amelia's, the project that Amelia was presenting on. So we'll just have about 30 seconds to answer this poll question, and then I'll share those results. Okay, great. So those results look great. Thanks for your positive responses, everybody. It looks like people are in agreement that this is going to benefit community forest users and residents. So thanks, everybody, for those results. And thank you, Amelia. I think there are no more questions at this time. So thank you all for your questions.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much, Amelia. That was great. Moving right along, next up on the agenda is Aaron and Miller from the Watershed Research and Training Center. Welcome, Aaron and Miller.
Good evening. Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that. Real quick, thank you so much as a new member to the Weaverville area. Having just relocated my family from the Midwest or Utah, Rockies, I guess. And I'm really happy to see all of this. We're talking about all of our projects in a public way. This is a great conversation to be part of, so thank you. Again, my name is Miller Bailey. I'm with the Watershed Research and Training Center at a Hayfork, but their work is across the county as well as the state. I have a project I want to talk about, but real quick, WRTC has been working locally in the area for nearly 30 years, and they've recently decided to increase and diversify some of their prescribed fire program. Myself and Aaron Banwell took the position as co-directors with the Watershed Research and Training Center. Erin's a fire ecologist by training. She's worked as a NEPA planner, as well as fire operations specialist, training specialist, and fire ecologist over the last 15 years in Northern California, Southern Oregon, and the high elevation of Arizona. My training is a little more crew oriented. I've spent the better part of a decade running hang crews and hotshot crews across the nation, as well as developing prescribed fire crews in a number of states, including Nebraska, Kansas, South Carolina, Northern California, Minnesota, in the Boundary Waters. We've taken on the project that WRTC has laid a lot of groundwork in, and the predecessors to this project have really built it up in a good way. We are grabbing it and moving it forward. Some of our goals as we talk about this is a diversity of training. It is a big part of myself and Aaron's background and passion, is bringing everybody to the table and having lots of group work and group training. Fire is a dynamic thing, and we all need to share the burden and work together to make wildfire or our community a little safer from wildfire. Currently, the Watershed Azalie, can you see the screen?
Hey, Miller, your audio is a little choppy, at least for me. I can indeed see your screen share. You might want to try, although it's unfortunate, turning off your video just to see if it clears up your audio a little bit. Miller, it looks like you're muted now. I'm not sure if that's intentional.
Azalie, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, we got you 5 count. Go ahead.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, jump into it. So this is, Azalie, can you see my screen, the Weaver Basin Community Protection Project?
Yes, can do.
Great, thank you. Apologize for that audio issue. Again, this is the project built on the predecessors before us. This is a grouping of around 12 landowners here located in Basin that have been generous enough to share the workload, share the liability, and realize that prescribed fire is important to our community and working together to keep us safe. So this, what you're looking at defines about 12 different landowners and partners that some of them are here on the call today. The other interesting part of the Watershed's project area for the Weaver Basin Community Protection Plan is, if you notice on the map, it sits within the Community Forest Protection Plan. So as you look at these two maps overlaid, there are large sections that integrate into each other. So telling that story of working together. This is the fire program's goal for 2020 as we go into the winter burn season. This unit 11 is what is what under our burn plan and community protection project. It sits just to the north side of town, referencing 5 Cent Gulch and the airport on the east side. And this is just north of Reservoir and Manzanita Road. The unit is divided into 3 units, about 120 acres, and is an oak woodland. Some of our objectives are reducing fuels for the WUI to maintain a safe perimeter for the town, foster cooperative burning partnerships, and then reintroducing fire into what is a beautiful oak woodland. And again, this project is really just grounds for cooperative burning. We are looking for partners like the Weaverville Volunteer Fire Station, TCRCD, WRTC. There are several partners coming together and sharing this workload across the board, as well as private landowners and corporations that are willing to share resources and liability to get projects like this done and keep the community safe. Any questions?
Thanks so much, Miller. That's great. I am not seeing any questions in the chat or hands raised at this time. I am putting Miller's contact information for everybody in the chat, and I'll launch a quick poll. So if you end up having any questions during the next 30 seconds, throw them up. But for now, we'll put the poll, and it should be showing up now. Okay, it's been about 30 seconds. We'll end the polling and you guys can take a look. The biggest category is definitely strongly agree, although there's a little bit across the board. Some people are neutral about it, and 1 person agrees. So thank you all for your answers. It's always interesting to see how people react. And thank you again, Miller, for that presentation. So at this point, we want to take a brief intermission so that speakers and everybody attending has a couple minutes to do whatever their body needs, whether that's a stretch or a drink of water or whatever else it may be. I think we're going to have this be an abbreviated intermission down to just 2 minutes. So we'll be back at around 6:50 to keep going, dive back into our next speakers. So take a couple minutes, do what you got to do, and we'll see you here at 6:50 in just 2 minutes.
Oops.
This is more anonymous.
Okay, everyone. I think that the intermission is over. Thank you for sticking around. We have several more, 4 more different presentations to see at this point. And we are sort of running a little long. And so if we can try to keep these next few presentations as brief as possible, that would be greatly appreciated. First up in the post-intermission presentations is Alex Cousins, who is representing the Trinity Public Utilities District. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks, Kelly. I'll do everything I can to keep this short. I just wanted to give a little bit of a presentation, or maybe just have more of a discussion about the right-of-way clearing that the PUD is working on. Many of you know, maybe some of you don't know, but the PUD is looking to expand the right-of-way, which is currently 20 feet to 130 feet on all of our distribution lines. Obviously, this is going to help to reduce the impact of a wildfire. We've seen the impacts of wildfire. It's been a topic of discussion on this meeting throughout the day. As far as it pertains to the Weaverville Community Forest, the one thing is that the main line that goes up from Mill Street up to the top up there, that's not one of our lines. That's one of PG&E's lines, so that won't be included in this right-of-way expansion. And so it'll be more the major distribution lines, which I think would essentially be Highway 3 going up towards the lake. So that's kind of the gist of the project. The PUD is paying for the NEPA on this. This is one of the first examples of third-party NEPA that's happening with the Forest Service around here, but the BLM and the Forest Service still have the final say on what happens. So we're working with a consulting company that's writing the NEPA. It gets presented to the Forest Service, BLM, they get to review it, public scoping, everything, just like a traditional NEPA project. Another part of this project is that WAPA, which is the Western Area Power Association, is also doing a similar clearing on their right-of-way, which comes from the Trinity substation and the Weaverville switch yard. So they're expanding from 80 to 130 feet, and that's the line that provides about 94% of the power that comes into Weaverville. or Trinity County. So, so having that reliability, I think, is going to be key, getting the not only the lines within Trinity County, but the lines that come to Trinity County. In a nutshell, what we're doing is we're going out and doing the NEPA right now. We're actually analyzing, I think it's 500 feet along the power lines so that we can ebb and flow depending on the terrain. So if we want to put 130 feet on the uphill side of it, we would do that rather than having to split everything right down the middle. So, so that's kind of it. I wouldn't mind taking questions and just hearing what the community forest has to say. I think one issue that might have to be dealt with in the near future are the retained receipts if we do end up clearing some trees. That was one of the projects that was initial with the community forest, was the PG&E went in to clear some of those trees and they left them on the ground. And so the stewardship or a timber sale was put forth, and some of those trees were taken to the mill, and the retained receipts went back into the community. So, how does BLM and the Forest Service look at the ownership of those trees within that right of way is probably a discussion point that we'll have to deal with in the near future. It'd be nice to maybe keep those with the community forest for future projects.
Thanks, Alex. Any questions for Alex still outstanding? I'm not seeing any in the chat or any raised hands. Okay. Unless I'm mistaken, it looks like there's no questions. I think we can move on to the next speaker. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Moving right along. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Sandoval with the Trinity County Resource Conservation District. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I'm the Education and Outreach Program Manager here at the Trinity County RCD. I've been here for a number of years, and part of our focus is on outdoor education with children, and that's what I'm going to share with you today after I can get my screen going. Let me know if you can see this.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the Trinity Children's Forest was incorporated into the Weaverville Community Forest in 2017 to promote connection to nature, healthy lifestyles, and environmental education opportunities. The Weaverville Community Forest is the perfect home for the Children's Forest, as it is easily accessible from town, and it offers many recreational opportunities as well as educational opportunities. An abundance of different natural ecosystems within the Weaverville Community Forest sets the stage for place-based learning opportunities. By promoting more youth to explore nature and all that it has to offer, we are inspiring the future of land stewards for generations to come. In 2017, the TCRCD entered into an agreement with the Shasta Trinity National Forest, part of their More Kids in the Woods program, to designate the Trinity Children's Forest with three main goals: provide outdoor experience to fourth grade students, increase awareness of forest functions, and increase healthy outdoor activity and connection to nature. Some of our objectives and deliverables under this program have been to, this funding has allowed us to sponsor 2 backpacking trips for local students with Ascend Wilderness experience for their multi-day hikes into the wilderness, where they receive a huge learning experience. Most of these kids have never set foot in the wilderness, and so it's a great opportunity for them to learn about the forests in a controlled environment. We've also been able to solicit donations that went towards mountain bikes that were given away to local 4th grade students from disadvantaged communities or homes. Those students were selected by the school staff, teachers, and principal to receive those bikes, and those bikes were awarded to them at the Trinity Bike Park in partnership with Trinity Trail Alliance and the CHP to teach safe bike riding practices. Another one of those Another one of our objectives was to lead field trips into the community forest with 4th grade students. This included working with the Weaverville Elementary School, as well as leading hikes for campers of the Weaverville Summer Day Camp. The Weaverville Summer Day Camp is a month-long day camp held at the Young Family Ranch in the month of July, normally, not this year. Those field trips have incorporated environmental education lessons that included fire ecology and hydrology and a wide range of topics. From those field trips, we did in-class lesson follow-up in-class lessons where we got their feedback about what they learned from being in the community forest. That feedback was used to create 5 interpretive signs that are now on the screen. You can't really read them here, but we are currently working with the Forest Service to get these installed before the end of the year. They will be along the McKenzie Gulch Loop, and follow up from these signs. We will have outreach in the form of, hopefully, well, it would be ideal to have a brochure, but we'll start with a flyer and then social media outreach and other kinds of electronic outreach. It's currently being held up in permitting processes, but we are very hopeful that we will have the go-ahead soon. So what is our future goals of the Trinity Children's Forest? We're currently developing the Trinity Children's Forest Master Plan to go hand in hand with the Weaverville Community Forest Strategic Plan. We want to build more partnership and collaboration, get more people involved, get ideas on what could be done for the Trinity Children's Forest, as well as planning and implementation, possibly in the form of volunteers or staff from local agencies. Our current funding is about to run out, and so we are actively seeking more financial support funding opportunities. From there, we find that it's extremely important to work with the local schools to see what they need in the form of like an outdoor classroom area designation. So that is it on the Trinity Children's Forest. If you have any more questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me through my email. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I am putting Elizabeth's contact information in the chat now. So if you have follow-up questions for her, you can ask there. As of now, I'm not seeing any questions that have popped up in the chat or any raised hands. So thank you, Elizabeth, again. And I think we can move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next up, we have Alan Siegmiller representing the Trinity Trail Alliance. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks, Kelly. My name is Alan Siegmiller. I'm the Vice President of the Trinity Trail Alliance. I'll just give a quick update and try to go through it as quickly as possible so we have time at the end. A little bit about Trinity Trail Alliance. Briefly, an excerpt from our mission is to create and enhance and preserve great trail experiences for both mountain bikers and other non-motorized trail users in Trinity County. This year with COVID, we kind of hunkered down a little bit, but we did enter into a volunteer service agreement with the U.S. Forest Service. We had a couple of members get certified as sawyers, and our trail committee, which had somewhat started last year, started taking off this year and meeting regularly. As the organization, we work to campaign for issues related to Trinity County and the trails. For example, we promoted getting people to, be vocal in their support of the Fuels and Recreation Project. We've been involved in trail planning, both with those new trails in that recreation component that Mike talked about, as well as doing ad hoc trail work as members working on the trails independently. And as an organization, we're here to respond to or listen to the public. As we become more visible within the community, we become a target for people to come forward and voice their concerns or wishes within the trail system. And we can act as a voice for land managers and owners, communicating trail closures, such as when Sierra Pacific closed the LaGrange Ditch Trail for a harvest operation. And we also work to post trail conditions and map updates to Trailforks, which is a crowdfunded website with trails. But COVID prevented us from doing group activities such as hikes and runs, group rides, Bigfoot Challenge, which has incorporated the trails here in the basin, did not proceed with including Weaverville this year because of COVID, and the LaGrange race was canceled, and we haven't had any organized trail work days. But probably one of the bigger things to happen this year was the bridge work done on East Weaver Creek. So all three bridges were either redecked in the case of the Rainbow Hanson Bridge and the East Weaver Campground Bridge, or rebuilt as the case in the Pole Bridge. This is work done by the Forest Service, Watershed, Friends of the RCD. We had donations from local organizations to help, and volunteers spend time working to redeck or rebuild the bridges, which leads us into a new campaign that we're starting. It's called Adopt a Bridge. The idea is that we're going to solicit volunteers from the community or members of Trinity Trail Alliance to kind of take ownership of a bridge for this winter season. The idea is that the volunteer will clean out the cracks periodically and keep the leaves and other debris off the deck of the bridges. So we're looking to start both with the three bridges of the East Weaver Creek, as well as the bridges along the upper West Weaver Trail and the West Weaver Trail in the kind of the western part of the basin. So here's a bridge of, these are the kind of the couple of the bridges. The one on the left there is the redeck Rainbow Hanson, and the one on the right is taken from a current bridge on the upper West Weaver Creek Trail. With that, I'll turn it over to any questions.
Any questions for Alan? While those are coming in, I have a quick poll associated with this presentation, so I will launch that. There's the poll. Okay, just another second, and I'll end here. That's an interesting one. So it seems like there's definitely people who would like to see new trails in the Weaver Basin Trail System. So that's a very interesting result. Oh, there, sorry, I wasn't sharing it. You should be able to see that now. Majority of people actually think that new trails might be needed. So that's interesting to see. Thank you for your participation there. I do have one question for Alan. It says, with the finalization of the Trinity County Active Transportation Plan, does the Trinity Trail Alliance anticipate partnering with the county to develop access routes to the trails or develop new trails?
Good question. I haven't thought about it. I I'd be curious to see what the access issues. I feel like there's the access to the trail system is, well, I feel like there's lots of opportunities to access to the trail. So I'd be curious to find out how that can be improved. But there's no reason not to partner with the county. I mean, we are trail users, we want trails. And if that's another way to get trails and people using the trails, then it's all good.
Great. I am not seeing, oh, second. Somebody is asking, has the suggestion of improved signage on the trails been addressed? In addition, a sign at the Lance Gulch cutoff would be nice. I don't know if you want to respond to that, Alan.
I'm sorry, a trail at the Lance Gulch cutoff?
Sorry, a sign at the Lance Gulch cutoff. So there's kind of two parts. This person is saying, has the suggestion of improved signage on the trails been addressed? And then also a sign at the Lance Gulch cutoff would be nice.
Okay. So we have taken up the topic of the trail signs in the basin. We're starting to inventory, which trail signs need to be corrected. And that's kind of where we're at right in the process right now. And I haven't heard of a suggestion for the Lance trail sign at the Lance Gulch cutoff. So that's new to me, and I can take it back to the Trails Committee and throw it out there.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions or raised hands at the moment. So barring anything last minute, I think we can move on. Thank you all for your questions, and thank you, Alan, for your presentation. That's great. Kelly.
I thought you were going to describe the breakout room session, but I'll go ahead and say the next section basically is going to be led by Kathleen McCulley, who is our Grizzly Corps member. Grizzly Corps is a program of the AmeriCorps program, and we are very excited to have AmeriCorps back here at the Trinity County RCD. It's been a very long time. Most people that are aware of AmeriCorps know that Trinity County has long had Watershed Steward program members here in Trinity County, but we have not had any or housed any for quite some time. So Grizzly Corps is a little bit different focus, where the Watershed Steward program is very specifically kind of fisheries related. The Grizzly Corps is much more forest health and upland related. So we're very pleased and excited to have Kathleen with us. So welcome, Kathleen.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for sticking with us tonight. My name is Kathleen, and as Kelly has described, I'm an AmeriCorps member here at the Trinity County RCD. So tonight I am going to be sharing with you about the WCF strategic plan update. Not everybody may know that the community forest has a strategic plan, but our stewardship is guided. My main project for the term of my service here will be working on the community forest, and specifically this strategic plan. So I'm here for the community and going to be working on this most of my time. So the first strategic plan was published in 2006, around when the community forest was first initiated. This update will be an 8-year timescale from 2021 to 2028. In the past, they've been a little bit shorter, but we're trying to look long term, and we're looking to publish next spring. So the strategic plan, is used mostly to kind of compare goals and objectives of the community against the available management resources that are available to us at the RCD, and just feasibility of projects and timing and things like that, to evaluate alternatives. So generally in this type of document, you would evaluate multiple alternatives, and eventually one of them, you choose one and it kind of becomes the plan, and you just present all alternatives considered to demonstrate our thought process and be transparent. So of course there will always be trade-offs, because we do have to choose between these different, amalgamation of projects and budgets and things like that. And in this case, we do have to pair our community's goals with the goals of the federal managers. As Kelly described, the community forest is officially managed by the BLM and the Forest Service, so we're constantly working with them. And a big part of the strategic plan too will also be exploring expanded funding options. Traditionally, the community forest receives its funding through what are called retained receipts, which are the timber revenues from harvests on the community forest. But while we originally planned to do many harvests every few years, we've only actually completed 2 on the community forest in the almost 20 years it's existed, so that budget is running low. So as far as the organizational kind of management structure, and again, the timeline on this strategic plan update, as has been described, the federal partners are the managers of the land, and kind of have to approve management. So they pick final projects and the decision details on that, and they do the environmental review and provide funding for every project. The RCD is kind of the boots on the ground for the federal partners. So we are the stewards, which is a little bit different than managers, for the forest, and we communicate to them the needs and kind of desired direction of the community through meetings like this. And obviously the community is, the way that the community forest is designed is that the people of and around Weaverville, and whoever's interested, honestly, in the community, really drive the planning process and choose the main management objectives for the community forest. So for this strategic plan update, we are intending to have an additional community meeting, so not just an annual meeting this year, maybe in February, kind of spring time, to gather feedback on what we've drafted so far with the strategic plan and make sure that we're going in the right direction. And then publish in May. So that's all gonna, Azalie and I are gonna be working together really hard throughout the spring and the remainder of 2020, and doing a lot of coordination with our different partners to get that out and make sure we're designing a great plan. All right, so we're gonna do a poll now, I think, to kind of gauge people's first priorities, start getting some of that feedback for the strategic plan. So if everybody could just take a few seconds and, well, maybe a little more than the other polls, just kind of peruse and see what's most important to you for management of the community forest.
Yeah, so this poll does have 3 questions asking about your highest, your second highest, and your lowest priorities for the WCF. So, and they all have the same exact options. So take your time. It'll be a little longer on this one, and make your choices. Okay, just a few responses. We'll give it another 15 to 30 seconds. Hopefully some more come in, make your choices, and we'll show the results. Okay, I'm going to end the polling here. So Kathleen, if you want to look at the results, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Comment.
So it looks like of the people we have here, the highest priority is actually wildfire and disturbance resilience within the community forest, which is obvious right now. It's definitely on everybody's minds. Second highest priorities, there's a tie between trails and native plants and or wildlife habitat, but kind of spread throughout on the options there. Lowest priorities actually is also trails, or all of these are equally important to me. So it seems like people really have a wide array of interests in the community forest. Thank you all for sharing. That's definitely helpful. So as kind of a comparison tool, we just wanted to show you what the original community forest objectives were, now that we've kind of gauged some of what people's interests are now. So the overarching vision in the past strategic plans was high visual quality, kind of aesthetics, with the main goal within that vision being a healthy, productive forest in the Weaverville Wildland Urban Interface, or WUI. So the thought there being a healthy forest is an attractive forest. And then you can see these are kind of our project areas within that goal to make that happen. And I think now we're going to try to move into some small group discussions through a Zoom feature called breakout rooms, and I'm going to pass that back to Azalie quickly to explain how that works.
Yeah, so in order to get smaller group discussions going on among this group, what we'll do is break into breakout rooms. And so what will happen is basically I'll create a number of different mini Zoom meetings that you'll see a notification come up on your screen in a minute when I do that, and it'll let you know you're being put into a breakout room, and all of a sudden you'll find yourself into a smaller Zoom meeting with hopefully just a few other people where you can discuss the topics that Kathleen is going to give you in a minute to talk about. And then you'll see a notification and a countdown when that breakout room is ending, and it will automatically bring you back into the larger room. And when you're in your breakout room, if you want to leave for whatever reason because your conversation has come to an end, you are welcome to hit the leave room button. When you're in the breakout room, just make sure that you don't accidentally leave the meeting. It'll ask you whether you want to leave the meeting or the room. So just leave room, and that'll bring you back to the larger meeting that we're all in now, and eventually we'll all end up back here to continue discussing with Kathleen. So once Kathleen has given you a little bit of information about what to discuss in your breakout rooms, I will start them, and you'll be whisked away into your breakout room.
Yeah, so I'll be quick. I know we're running low on time. Thank you all for sticking with us till the bitter end. So if you could all begin your discussions, kind of thinking back to the poll we just did on what you thought was your number one priority, or if your number one priority was not captured in the poll, please share and discuss that with your group. And we're just kind of looking to see what people are thinking and maybe why this is their number one priority, and give you a chance to talk to your neighbors. And you know, if there's time and if you'd all like to keep discussing before the breakout rooms close, feel free to move on to any hopefully community forest topics you like. And yeah, just any observations or ideas you'd like to share with others. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to report back on what everyone discussed. That information is going to be really useful to me in drafting the strategic plan. So if you could quickly pick one person when you get in your breakout rooms to share that back to the group when we reconvene. And with that being said, remember what your room number is. So if we call on you, you'll know who you are.
Okay, great. I'm creating the rooms now. So presenters or speakers, you can leave your room and come back to the main session. Everyone else, please hang around with your group mates if you can and have a chat. And we'll see you all in a few minutes.
Oh, we're down to 7:30. Yeah. Oh, what was our room number?
We were group 1. I guess, we're at this point where, like, Azalie, correct me if I'm wrong, do we want to just briefly touch on sort of whatever the main topic was for each of the groups?
Yeah, we'll let Kathleen take it from here.
Yeah, so we'll be really quick. Oz, do you know how many breakout rooms there were actually total? I think there's at least 3.
Yeah, there were 4.
Okay. I was in breakout room 2, so I kind of know what we talked about. Does breakout room 1 want to maybe give a super quick report? I know we're a little bit past 7:30, so if you need to go, that's okay. But we would really appreciate hearing what everyone said.
I don't know what breakout room we were in, but I'm the spokesperson for my breakout room, so I'm going to volunteer to go first.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, no sweat. Yeah, we talked about fire resilience and forest management, as well as the trail system in the Weaverville Basin and how those uses can complement each other. We talked a little in terms of the trail systems being utilized as prescribed fire breaks, and how trail systems or recreation in general can change the user groups, the common user groups, and can help with unwanted fire return at times. And then I talked a little about some of our efforts ongoing in Little Browns Creek and Browns Mountain. So not just about suppressing fires, but also trying to reduce severe fire impacts when a fire does take place. So.
Awesome, thank you, Rob.
I was in group 1 with Colleen and several other people, and most of the topic that we touched on, that was brought up by one of the individuals in the group, was kind of the marketability of products coming off of the forest, and particularly saw logs going to the local mill. And I did report out that when we were doing more active management of the sales that were coming off, particularly the BLM side and the aughts, that we made sure that those, we were getting those logs to the local mill, which obviously was one of the main, economic drivers for the community forest, which was to support the local economy. And there was some need to kind of, I guess, check in with the forest on their side, Forest Service side, as to where, where the logger that, has basically been, I believe, been doing the last 3 phases of Browns, phase 1, 2, and 3. I think it was all the same logger, but I'm not certain about whether or not those logs went to the local mill. So definitely was kind of economy, driven with regard to the, the product coming off the forest.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Is there anybody from the last remaining group who'd like to share? Maybe we lost them since it's
I was in group 4, and I think we brought up both wildfire and fuels reduction and forest health issues, and also native plants being important and how they can be complementary. And then there was also a concern from a member in our group about the use of the power line areas on the west side of the forest for motorcycles and dirt bikes and such racing up and down in that area, and ways to maybe put signage or discourage that type of use.
Great, thank you, Tracy. Well, we are definitely at time, so I don't want to take up people's evening. I'd be happy to chat with anyone for as long as they like on the community forest. So I think if anyone does want to stick around, I know I'll be on for a few minutes at least. But everyone else, please have a great evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, I will say though, Azalie put in the chat box a feedback form that we're trying to get people to use specifically to gather info for the strategic plan update. So please take a look at that if you have a chance and want to provide any suggestions, praise, criticism, you know, the whole gamut. And look out for our February follow-up meeting.
I want to thank everybody that was on the call, everybody that presented. I want to thank Azalie and Kathleen for doing such a great job of like organizing this meeting. I felt like it came off pretty smoothly for, you know, being as as large as it was with the number of people that we had. So thanks everybody for attending, and it was good. We look forward to hearing more of your feedback.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I did want to say, Kathleen, there was a question from John in the chat that you may want to respond to somehow. I'm not sure if John is still on the call here.
I
can read it too. It says, given that the East Weaver Creek campground is the only campground in the WCF, has the steering committee taken a position on keeping it open? Possible item for the new plan, question mark? So I don't know if you want to respond to that now, but something to think about the priority of that campground.
I guess I'm not sure if this is kind of implying that the campground might close or whether it should close because it's the only one. I personally am not aware of any plans for it to close, and it seems to me that maybe because it's the only one, we should keep it. But that's something we could maybe bring up at the steering committee meeting.
To the best of my knowledge, this is a topic that's come up particularly in the recreation committee of the collaborative group. And to the best of my knowledge, the discussions that have happened there, the campground is at least to the best of my knowledge at this point, is just a day use campground or the day use facility at this point. They're not using it as a campground per se right now. And to the best of my knowledge, there isn't any desire to close it, but because there's not really like a strong presence there for the forest basically like contracts out to a separate recreation organization or company that manages, like all the campgrounds around the lake, for example. And I believe they were supposed to be taking care of this one, but it's kind of a low priority one and a low use one, and it costs them a lot to do it. So it was, Tracy says that it was open for group reservations this season. So apparently it was open to a certain extent. But to the best of my knowledge, there wasn't any desire to like close it. It's just sort of changed, from being a standard day use standard campground to a day use overall. But I'm not sure what the plans for the future are on that. Thank you, Tracy, for that comment.
Thanks, Kelly, for the response.
Yeah, and I can chime in just a little bit on that as well. Like Kelly said, it's kind of it's a money loser. It doesn't really cater to the current recreation population. People usually have trailers and or boats or something like that. And the campground was designed for, camper trucks back in the day. And so it's too tight and we can't redesign it. It's hemmed in with the repairing area. And so, yeah, it is open now for group rentals. And we also use it a lot for agency situations, like when we have the CCC people working in the area and or fire crews. But yeah, there is no plan to close it. There has been some discussion on perhaps changing ownership of it and having it more of a city resource or community resource than federal owned. But you know, that's a long-term goal. And then also we're looking at trying to expand or increase the use in the Rush Creek campground, because we have a little more room there to where we can make it more friendly for the current user groups. And there's also some effort looking into the Musser Hill Ridge, because I think it's pretty important to have a nice campground close to our community that's close enough to where you can go down to get a restaurant or something, but also just far enough out of town so it doesn't become a homeless enclave. And we've had a lot of damage to the East Weaver campground by undesirables. But there is no plan to close it.
Thanks, Mike. That's great. I think
All right,
that
thank you,
pretty much
everyone.
picked up. I think that's picked up most of the questions that we had in the chat, anyways.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any more. So I think, like I said, unless anybody just wants to hang out, we can wrap up for the evening.
Azalie's still currently in the host position, so.
Oh, to end it. Okay. Yeah, she
yeah.
just had to leave, but she's left me with her computer, so
Okay.
I can do that.
So yeah, when you can go ahead and basically shut the thing down, and then it should basically save, as the host, it should save the chat itself. I'm going to save it right
Great.
now, actually, but it should save it to her computer.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I will go close out the meeting then. Thank you so much for being involved. Have a good evening.
Hey, Kathleen, real quick, just oh, I guess you took off.
Yeah, Ricky?
Oh, I was just going to see if we were still on. We had a meeting scheduled, but it wasn't confirmed, so I just wanted to check in. But